welcome to ET Now. I'm Ashwin Mohan and you're watching Amicus Curiae, where we get you news and views that you can use from the world of corporate law, tax and regulatory affairs. And what an action-packed week it has been. Starting off, of course, with the Big Bang expose, the Panama paper leaks, followed, of course, by the government's decision to move the Supreme Court in the 8,500 crore rupee transfer pricing case. We'll take a closer look at the Panama files in the next segment, but we're going to kickstart proceedings on this week's show with a closer look at the implications of the government's move to, in fact, challenge the Bombay High Court order against Vodafone. And to throw more perspective on that front, we are joined by Vipul Jhaveri, Managing Partner Tax at Deloitte India. Vipul, thank you so much for taking out time. For starters, tell us, Vipul, what do you make of this move? Because this move comes at a time when, of course, there are several aspects of the negotiation talks between Vodafone and the government which are up in the air. And if you look at this move, it's in stark contrast to what the government did last year in a similar case involving Vodafone. That, of course, was a share premium case. But what do you make of this move, them deciding to challenge this order at the Supreme Court? This will clearly lead to more prolonged litigation between these two entities.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to say the least, the action of the revenue is quite intriguing, very inconsistent with the recent, statements and official positions taken up by the government, and also on other litigious matters where the authorities decided not to, take up the matter further in appeal. So it certainly is intriguing. And of course, it is going to lead to a fair amount of confusion as to what is the real intent behind this SLP that is being filed.
Vipul, let's also keep the budget in mind when we're discussing this Big Bang move. And clearly in the budget, the government threw open a window to settle all the retro tax cases, pay up the principal amount so that the interest and the penalty portion gets waived off. Clearly, the biggest case in terms of quantum was that involving Vodafone. Now, Vodafone officially gave a lukewarm response to this window by the government. So, keeping the budget window and opportunity in mind to settle this 7 to 8 year old tax pat, what do you make of the fact that there is yet another big case that will now, in fact, be fought out between the government and Vodafone at the top court of the land?
Well, it is possible that it is an indirect indication by the government to nudge Vodafone itself into, going ahead with the option available with them, to settle the dispute. Also, it is possible that through this measure, the government intends to, create a precedent of, settling a large case and use it to, how should I put it, advertise as to how complex cases could be more easily settled.
Vipul, as far as the 8,500 crore Vodafone transfer pricing case is concerned, if you look at the legal history, even though the government may have lost at the Bombay High Court, but it did indeed get a favorable order from a lower forum, and that's, of course, the tax tribunal, which ruled that the government or the revenue authorities did indeed have the jurisdiction to proceed against Vodafone. So do you think that was perhaps one of the triggers for the government to take this case to its logical conclusion and move the Supreme Court?
Well, surely, I guess that has to be one of the factors. But, when one reads through the High Court's decision, I don't see that there, these kind of matters and issues, positions taken by the authorities, they have been addressed squarely by the High Court, which has predominantly relied on the mother decision of the Supreme Court in the earlier case. And therefore, Supreme Court in that case had clearly stated that the entire transaction has to be looked in a holistic manner, and it cannot be broken up into parts and viewed independently. So in that view of the matter, the High Court has simply followed the Supreme Court decision. Ideally, had it been accepted and acquired burial given to a much vexed kind of a matter, that would have been ideal in the current context, but strange other ways that both the government and God act, and therefore we will have to wait and watch now.
Vipul, now let's take a closer look at the question of law involved in this high-profile transfer pricing case. And here I'm quoting from the Income Tax India's Twitter handle, which of course confirmed ET Now's story after we broke the fact that the government had indeed moved the Supreme Court. And according to the Income Tax India's Twitter handle, the government's official stance is as follows. They say that a substantial question of law has arisen on the issue of taxability of capital gains arising on the surrender of call option rights. In fact, they go on to say that the High Court has held that the surrender of option rights is not a transfer under the provisions of the Income Tax Act. How important is this question from a structuring point of view and also from a foreign investor point of view, Vipul?
Yeah, here again, I would think there is a serious doubt whether there is any substantial question of law. Again, because the Supreme Court has earlier concluded that there is no transfer of an option because it is part of a larger scheme. In fact, there is no consideration also in attributable to this so-called transfer, and therefore one would expect if and when the matter is disposed at the Supreme Court, they would have to follow its earlier decision and dismiss the SLP.
Vipul, in fact, the government via its Income Tax Department Twitter handle has also gone on to say that the Bombay High Court ruling in this case will have an adverse impact on many other domestic cases, and that's the reason why they decided to go ahead. What do you make of that rationale?
Well, frankly, I'm not so sure, how widely applicable this particular issue is. In fact, the kind of complex transaction that Vodafone had was very unique because it covered a wide gamut of arrangements, and therefore to say that this has got a wider implication, personally at least I am not aware of too many similar transactions, and therefore I think this might be a little bit self-serving.
Right, Vipul. Now the government came to power in fact with a clear mandate, and that mandate was to erase and bury tax terrorism. Now the unresolved Vodafone tax case has of course stuck out like a sore thumb during the government's tenure. Attempts have been made by the government, of course. There was in fact a window that was thrown open to entities like Vodafone in the budget. There's not been too much progress made on that front. What kind of a signal do you think this constant litigation will send out to foreign investors who are in fact eagerly waiting for the Vodafone tax saga to be buried once and for all?
Well, again, the signal again would be mixed, because there were many good things that the government did since the new government has come into power to assuage the concerns of the foreign investor. On many counts, they have set up committees, they have brought out clarifications, amendments to the law also, which are favoring the taxpayer. And now, suddenly we are faced with another example which, to an extent, contradicts the consistent action it has taken in the recent past. So certainly there will be some mixed feelings, but Again, one would hope that, this is treated as a standalone kind of act, and it doesn't really affect the foreign investment that India needs desperately at this point in time.
All right, Vipul Jhaveri, thank you so much for taking out time and shedding more light on that big move by the government. On that note, it's time to slip into a short break, but don't go anywhere. Keep watching Amicus Curiae, because on the other side, we're going to take a closer look at the Panama paper leaks.